house was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hesitate at the edges of the property, brushing against the gnarled oaks without a sound. Ajay stepped onto the cracked porch, the boards groaning under his weight, and froze. From somewhere deep inside, a single metallic click echoed, a latch or a lock snapping shut. He swore he hadn't touched anything. A shadow shifted in the hallway beyond the front door. Not a person, too tall, too thin, but it moved like it remembered the shape of someone. He blinked and it was gone. Only the faint scent of something sweet and rotting lingered, curling through the air like smoke. Ajay's phone buzzed in his pocket. A message unsigned. They never leave. Not really. He swallowed, telling himself it was a prank, but the hairs on the back of his neck prickled anyway. The door creaked slowly, inching open by itself. Behind it, darkness pooled in corners, thick and waiting, as though the walls themselves breathed. A whisper, soft but insistent, brushed against his ear. "You shouldn't be here." He spun around, heart hammering, but the porch was empty. Only the house remained, patient and hungry. Something in him knew he had crossed a line. Something in him knew there would be no turning back. The first scream had not yet come, but it would. AJ's hand lingered on the doorknob, cold sweat slicking his palm. The wind outside had died completely, leaving a suffocating stillness. He pushed the door open fully and stepped into the hallway. The floorboards groaned beneath him as if the house itself were warning him back. The smell of decay was stronger now, mixed with something faintly floral, like wilted roses buried under dust. The walls were lined with portraits, their painted eyes seeming too alert, too knowing. Ajay's gaze caught one of a stern-looking man with a mustache, standing behind a child clutching a doll. He blinked. The child's eyes had changed. One was now gray like stone. He shook his head. It must have been a trick of the light. A cold draft slipped under the front door, carrying with it the sound of soft footsteps from somewhere deep inside. He paused. Nothing moved in the hallway. The footsteps continued, slow, deliberate, echoing as if on marble, though the floors were old wood. "Hello?" he called, voice small, swallowed by the house. No answer. AJ pulled his coat tighter around himself and moved deeper inside. Every step seemed to make the house groan louder, and the shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. A rocking chair in the corner shifted slightly, though no breeze stirred it. The air felt heavy, pressing against his chest like a weight he couldn't lift. He reached the kitchen. The table was set for tea, cups neatly in place, but a thin layer of dust covered everything. One cup rocked gently, as if someone had just pushed it. He froze. "Who's there?" His voice sounded stranger than usual, fragile, almost breaking. A whisper answered, barely audible. "You shouldn't be here." Ajay spun, heart hammering, but the kitchen was empty. Only the dim light from the single window illuminated the room. He noticed the window latch had moved. It was slightly open, though he hadn't touched it. Cold air seeped in, carrying a faint sound, laughter, high-pitched, echoing faintly from somewhere above. He forced himself to climb the stairs. Each step protested under his weight, creaking in protest or warning. The upstairs hallway stretched out like a tunnel, doors slightly ajar, shadows pooling at the edges. One door at the far end had scratches along the frame, shallow but deliberate. Something had clawed at it. AJ's mind raced. This was his family's house, abandoned for years, left to rot after what? His grandmother's death? His uncle's disappearance? The rumors he'd dismissed as childish superstition? Yet now, standing here, he remembered all of it. The whispers from neighbors, the vague warnings of distant relatives. None of it had prepared him for this silence, for the way the house felt alive, watching, waiting. A sudden noise made him jump, a picture falling from the wall. It hit the floor face down, cracking slightly. He knelt to pick it up. The photograph was of the same stern man and child he had seen earlier. Only now the child's smile was gone, replaced by a grimace of terror. Behind the child, in the background of the photo, a shadow loomed. A figure that shouldn't exist in a photograph. Ajay's phone vibrated again. A text. "They're closer than you think." He dropped the phone. It skidded across the floor, ringing faintly against the wood. The lights flickered. For a brief moment the hallway was empty, normal, silent. And then the shadows shifted. One of the doors, his grandmother's old bedroom, creaked open slowly. He felt a presence, a pressure behind him, heavy and insistent. AJ's mind screamed at him to run, to leave, but his legs felt frozen. Something brushed past his shoulder. A whisper, cold and wet. "You will join us soon." Ajay bolted toward the staircase, but the steps seemed longer now, the walls closing in. His own breathing sounded alien, loud in the oppressive silence. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched impossibly long. He turned to look back, and the door at the bottom of the stairs was gone. In its place, only a dark void that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat he could feel in his chest. A memory flickered, his grandmother's voice, trembling. The house remembers, and it keeps what it wants. He stumbled down the hall, toward the one room he felt he could trust, the study, where old journals and letters were kept. Perhaps there he could make sense of it all. Perhaps there he could find answers to the stories he had dismissed. The family cursed for generations. Shadows that moved. Whispers of things that should not exist. The study door was ajar. He pushed it open. Papers scattered across the floor as if blown by an invisible wind. On the desk, one journal lay open. Its pages were filled with neat handwriting. Except the last entry was different. Jagged, rushed, and barely legible. It is in the walls. It is in the mirrors. If you read this, it is already too late. A chill ran down AJ's spine. The whisper returned, closer this time, behind his ear. "You shouldn't have come back." The study door slammed shut on its own. Darkness swallowed the room. And for the first time, Ajay realized he was no longer alone in his family home. AJ pressed his back against the study door, heart hammering. The journal lay open on the desk before him, pages yellowed and curling. The writing seemed alive, the letters shifting subtly, as if trying to move under his gaze. He read the last entry again. "It is in the walls. It is in the mirrors. If you read this, it is already too late." The shadows around him seemed to pulse, coalescing near the corners, stretching along the walls. He forced himself to look around, to breathe, but the air was thick, almost viscous, like the house had become a living creature, and he was trapped inside its throat. The first memory came unbidden, his grandmother, sitting in the same study decades ago, hands shaking, whispering warnings he had dismissed as eccentricity. "Ajay, they follow bloodlines. We cannot escape them. They wait." He remembered staring at her, confused. "Who waits, Nani?" "The ones we brought in. The ones that will never leave. Even if the walls crumble, even if we vanish." At the time, he had laughed. Superstitions, stories to frighten children. But now, alone in the study, he felt the truth of her words press into his chest. The first micro-event, Ajay stepped toward the bookshelf to steady himself. As his hand brushed a row of dusty tomes, one book fell open onto the floor. The pages revealed a photograph of his great-grandfather standing in the same house, decades earlier. In the background, an indistinct shadow lingered behind him, a shadow shaped like a person, but stretched and twisted unnaturally. AJ froze. The air hummed with something almost imperceptible, a whisper, so soft he almost missed it. "We remember you." He spun around. The study was empty. Papers lay scattered across the floor. The chair had rocked slightly, though no breeze stirred it. He picked up the journal again, scanning further back. There were notes, written by his grandmother's mother, then her grandmother, each recounting the same eerie occurrences. Shadows, whispers, objects moving, unexplained deaths. The handwriting grew frantic in the later entries. One passage caught him off guard. "They are patient. They choose who sees. They wait generations to reclaim what is theirs." The hairs on his neck stood. The words were not just history. They were a warning. Paranoia sets in over the next hours. Though time felt elastic in the house, AJ moved from room to room, cataloging every strange occurrence. Every object slightly out of place made him jump. The grandfather clock, long broken, began ticking softly at intervals, then stopped, then ticked backward. Faint footsteps echoed in the hallways. He could swear he heard murmured names, ancestors, spirits, and the whispers seemed to follow him, retreating when he turned to look. He tried calling a friend, anyone, but the line went dead. Even the mobile network seemed swallowed by the house. The journal suggested that technology itself could be unreliable around the family curse. The house seemed aware of him. Doors he had opened closed again, slowly, deliberately. Mirrors reflected something off. Sometimes his face, sometimes a shadowy figure lurking behind him, impossible to see directly. He began questioning his sanity, but the evidence mounted. He was not imagining it. Flashback, the legend of the family curse. He sank onto the sofa, opening another section of the journal. His grandmother had written extensively about the curse, tracing it back to his great-great-grandfather. A man involved in something dark, rumors of a pact with a spirit, or perhaps an unspeakable crime. The text was fragmented, a bargain made to secure wealth, to protect the bloodline. It demanded obedience. Every generation. One must witness, one must pay, otherwise it spreads. Shadows claim what is theirs. Another entry described similar occurrences in his father's youth. Items moving on their own, whispers in the night, neighbors reporting strange lights, unexplained sicknesses. The house had been a silent witness to generations of torment, patient and patient, waiting for each new heir to come of age. AJ's own life, ordinary until now, was simply the next chapter. Another micro-event. AJ tried to leave the study to get air. The hallway stretched longer than he remembered. Doors along the way seemed to whisper faintly, scratching sounds emanating from inside. Though when he opened them, the rooms were empty. In one room, he saw a rocking chair move back and forth slowly, though nothing was on it. Then a faint, high-pitched laugh echoed from the corner of the ceiling. He looked up and froze. A shadow moved across the beams, long, sinuous, like smoke shaped into limbs. He bolted down the hallway toward the stairs. At the landing, a neighbor's voice echoed from somewhere inside the house. "You should not have come back." AJ froze. The voice was unmistakable. He remembered Mr. Khan, the elderly neighbor, who had whispered warnings when IJ had visited the house before. Some doors, some walls, they never let you leave. Dialogues as warnings. AJ encountered a caretaker, an old man who had once worked in the house, suddenly appearing from the shadows of the kitchen. "I told your family. Leave it be. Don't come back. What is happening here? What are they? They are what your ancestors summoned. And they remember. You can't hide." The man's eyes darted to the ceiling where shadows coiled like serpents. He shivered visibly, muttering something under his breath before vanishing as suddenly as he appeared. Increasing escalation. By late evening, Ajay could no longer ignore the signs. Objects moving when he wasn't looking. Whispers that seemed intelligible when he strained to listen. He sees. He knows. He cannot leave. Mirrors reflecting faces that weren't his own. Distorted. Twisted, pale relatives he had never met. Walls that seemed to breathe. Expanding and contracting, drawing him further into the house. His rational mind screamed that he should leave. But every attempt met resistance. Stairs that stretched into darkness. Doors that opened to unfamiliar rooms. Hallways that looped impossibly. Protagonist questions sanity. He spoke aloud to himself, trying to anchor reality. "It's just a house. It's old. I'm imagining it." But then a whisper replied, perfectly clear. "No, you are not imagining it. And soon, you will belong to it." AJ staggered backward, hitting the wall. Cold, hard, the shadows in the corners of the hallway thickened, moving with intent. Fear surged, primal and uncontrollable. First true signs of inevitable doom. AJ returned to the study, the journal clutched to his chest. The pages now contained new writing he hadn't seen before, scrawled in the margins. "You cannot run. You are the next. We are patient and we remember." A chill ran through him. Every warning he had dismissed as superstition now screamed truth. The house was not just haunted, it was alive with the curses of generations. Suddenly the air in the room thickened. The shadows detached from the corners, pooling in the center. He could feel eyes on him from every angle, watching, judging, waiting. A whisper hissed, brushing against his ear. "Time to pay what is owed." AJ stumbled back, tripping over papers. The walls seemed to pulse with a heartbeat all their own. He had no idea what awaited him, only that it was inevitable, unstoppable, and close. Much closer than he could have imagined. Cliffhanger leading to climax. He backed against the desk. The shadows coalesced, forming shapes he could barely comprehend. Distorted, elongated figures. Faces he recognized from the family portraits, now twisted into grotesque mockeries. They reached toward him silently. His breath came in ragged gasps. The journal slipped from his hands, falling open to the last entry once more. "If you read this, it is already too late. And in that moment, Ajay realized the house had decided. He was no longer an observer. He was part of the haunting now. Ajay stumbled backward, the shadows pressing closer. The walls seemed alive, breathing, twisting, their wooden panels groaning as if the house itself exhaled in anticipation. His eyes darted wildly, trying to make sense of the shapes emerging from the darkness. Faces, some familiar from old photographs, others strange and alien, twisted, elongated, peering at him from corners and ceilings. "Stop."
"Please stop!"
he screamed, voice cracking. The whisper answered from every corner simultaneously. "It cannot be stopped." "It never stops," panic seized him. He bolted toward the stairway, but the steps stretched unnaturally, leading to rooms he didn't recognize. Doors slammed behind him as if the house were herding him toward something inevitable. Each door he passed twisted, the wood writhing, grooves forming grotesque faces screaming silently. Ajay reached what he recognized as the main hallway, only to see it had transformed. The walls pulsed, coated in shadows that moved with intent. A figure appeared at the far end, a woman, translucent, eyes hollow, long black hair hanging in tatters over a pale, expressionless face. He froze and she glided forward without a sound. "Ajay, you shouldn't have come back," she whispered, voice cold, echoing like glass breaking. He stumbled back, almost falling over the scattered pages of the journal. He picked one up at random. The ink had shifted. Words scratched themselves across the paper. "Face what you fear, or join it." He realized the truth. This was not just a haunting. It was a trial, a confrontation, a reckoning. The entity reveals itself, shadows detached from the walls and ceiling, forming grotesque humanoid shapes. Each figure's face mirrored a relative, great-grandparents, uncles, cousins, but twisted into horrifying expressions, as though the torment of generations had been etched into their features. They reached toward him, arms long, hands skeletal. "You belong to us now," one hissed, its voice a blend of all the ancestors he had ever known. Ajay backed into the study. The door slammed shut behind him, locking. Mirrors lining the walls began to warp. His reflection multiplied, each version twisting into something unrecognizable. One smiled at him, leering with teeth too sharp. Another cried silently, eyes hollow. The shadows whispered all at once. "It is your bloodline. It is your debt. You cannot run." Ajay's hands shook. He slammed his palms against the desk, breathing ragged. He had to survive, had to escape, but the house had erased all exits, terrifying dialogue and confrontation. A distorted voice, childlike and echoing, cut through the whispers. "Do you see us now? Do you understand?" "Who? What are you?" Ajay choked out. "We are what your ancestors bargained for. We are the debt you inherited. We are inevitable," the voice hissed. I can't," he stammered. "You already have," it replied. From the shadows, a figure lunged forward, hands stretching impossibly, grasping at him. Ajay stumbled, landing on the floor. He tried to crawl backward, but the shadows multiplied, rising from every corner of the room, climbing the walls, spilling across the ceiling. The air felt thick, heavy with decades of sorrow, rage, and malice. You wanted answers. "Now face them!" Psychological collapse. Ajay's mind began to fracture under the relentless pressure. Every whispered threat, every shifting shadow, every distorted face pushed him closer to madness. He remembered the journal entries, the warnings, the distant relatives' fearful faces. The house was a living memory of generations of horror, and he was being consumed by it. Time became meaningless. Hours, minutes, or centuries, he could not tell. Each step felt heavier than the last. Every reflection in every mirror was him, yet not him. The shadows pressed closer, brushing against his skin, cold and insistent. He could hear the soft, wet sound of fingers tracing his arms, legs, back. "Ajay, join us, belong forever," they whispered in unison. "No," he screamed, but his voice faltered. His knees buckled, and he fell into the middle of the room, surrounded on all sides by faces, shapes, whispers, claws, shadows, and echoes of the past. The house turns. Alien walls twisted, becoming corridors that led nowhere. Windows showed impossible vistas, endless forests, stormy skies, rooms that should have been in the basement, now stretching upward infinitely. The study itself seemed to breathe, its walls pulsing, floors bending. He ran, but every path led him back to the same center. the desk with the journal open, mocking him. The shadows laughed, high-pitched, guttural, echoing through the warped architecture. You cannot leave. We wait for generations. And now it is yours. AJ clawed at the journal, flipping pages desperately. Handwriting danced across the lines, forming new messages. Your fear feeds us. Your blood binds us. Accept it. The journal's words burned in his vision, searing into his mind. He tried to scream, but found no sound came. The shadows surged forward. Horror peaks, dialogue and entity interaction a figure, clearer than the others. A tall, skeletal man, dressed in the style of his great-great-grandfather, stepped from the shadows. You think you can fight what your bloodline owes? I'll find a way. I won't belong to you, AJ shouted, voice trembling. It is too late. It is always too late. The skeletal man raised a hand. The shadows writhed, forming chains of darkness that wrapped around AJ's limbs, chest, and throat. He struggled, trying to pull free, but the house itself seemed to tighten its grip. Every breath burned. Every heartbeat thudded like a drum in a tomb. Your ancestors failed. Your mother failed. And now, you will not succeed. Climactic terror, AJ felt himself pulled upward, suspended in darkness. Shadows crawled along his skin, burrowing, searing, whispering in voices that belonged to his family and strangers alike. The walls themselves moaned, pulsing, groaning, as if the house was exhaling centuries of rage and grief. He tried to look around. Mirrors floated in the air, showing impossible scenes, rooms he had never seen, events he had never witnessed, and horrors he could not comprehend. Join us, or be erased, the shadows hissed. AJ's mind fragmented further. Faces from the portraits, shadows of ancestors, whispers, and cries of unseen children blended into one impossible, overwhelming cacophony. He felt his identity slipping, merging with the curse that had haunted generations. Last words, in one fleeting moment, clarity struck. He whispered, barely audible, I'm not ready. I won't. 1,000 voices laughed, screamed, and whispered, You are ours, forever. The shadows engulfed him completely. Light fled. The house fell silent, as if holding its breath, leaving only the faint echo of a heartbeat. Or was it AJ's? Cliffhanger leading to resolution hours, or days later, the house appeared calm. The study was empty, dust settled again. The journal lay closed on the desk, pristine. Mirrors reflected only the empty room. But in the corner, a shadow lingered, thin and coiled. In the silence, a whisper, faint yet unmistakable, brushed the air. Another chapter begins. The house was silent. AJ was gone. Or perhaps he had never truly existed in the house the way it remembered him. The study was empty. The journal closed on the desk, as if waiting patiently for the next heir to arrive. Dust lay undisturbed on the floor, but the air carried a faint, bitter tang, like smoke long extinguished. Outside, the wind had returned, rustling the branches of the gnarled oaks that surrounded the property. Yet even with the sun rising, the house seemed darker than its shadow should allow, a maw of waiting silence. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones when asked about it. Some said they'd heard laughter in the night, others a scream so faint it could have been the wind. Inside, shadows lingered, pooling in corners, stretching along walls. They no longer moved aggressively, but waited, patient as centuries. A whisper drifted across the hallway. Another chapter begins. Aftermath. The house's silence weeks passed. The town had begun to notice subtle oddities again. Lights flickering in the windows when no one lived there. Faint footsteps echoing along empty halls. Children passing the street shivered as if touched by something unseen. The house seemed untouched from the outside, ordinary almost, yet entirely alive within. An estate agent arrived to list the property. As he unlocked the door, he paused. Dust lay thick on every surface, yet the air felt heavy, suffocating. Something inside made him hesitate. He shook his head, laughing nervously at himself, and stepped inside. The floorboards groaned beneath him. Mirrors reflected the empty room, yet he thought he saw a faint figure behind him, pale and fleeting. He turned. Nothing. Probably just the morning light, he muttered. But his voice sounded small, swallowed by the house. The family left behind, AJ's family, oblivious to the full extent of what had happened, tried to move on. His parents received only cryptic messages, a voicemail of heavy breathing, a photograph of the study desk with the journal closed, and an unsigned letter. It watches. It waits. Blood remembers. They spoke little of it, though some felt a cold, lingering presence even in their home. Nights were restless. Shadows flickered at the edge of vision. The family tried rational explanations: stress, grief, coincidence. But each unexplained sound, each moved object, gnawed at the edges of reason. Lingering psychological horror. The horror of the house had not left AJ entirely. Somewhere, suspended between the living and the vanished, he remained. His awareness flickered, sometimes a whisper in the wind, sometimes a shadow brushing a corner, a glimpse of movement in mirrors. The house had claimed him, reshaped him into its memory, and in doing so, ensured the cycle continued. He could hear the echoes of the ancestors, sighs, whispers, occasional cries of anger. The shadows carried their patience, their malice, and their hunger. Time no longer applied to him. He existed in fragments, moments, echoes, memories. "We are patient," they whispered. "We remember. We wait." The journal lay open once more on the study desk. Its pages were blank, except for the last line, which appeared slowly, as if written by an unseen hand. "The next will come, and we will not forget." The house moves beyond months later. Townspeople noticed that the house seemed different. Visitors reported strange phenomena: lights flickering on in empty rooms, sudden drops in temperature, doors opening on their own, objects shifting. The estate agent, despite his initial skepticism, refused to return. One child, passing by the iron gate, claimed to see a young man, pale and wide-eyed, staring from an upstairs window. The parents dismissed it as imagination, but the child described the figure in detail. He looked like he was trapped and scared. Inside, Ajay remained, watching the world through the cracks of the house, bound to it, his presence a lingering memory. The house's hunger was sated for now, but it never slept. It never forgot. Subtle, final horror. On a quiet evening, when the wind was still and the sun set early, a neighbor reported hearing faint whispers carrying from the direction of the house. "It is coming. It is waiting. It will not let you go." A figure moved past a window, just a shadow, flickering, almost human. Mirrors in the house's windows reflected more than the sky or the trees. Glimpses of distorted faces, pale and silent, peering out. Those who saw it later reported nightmares. Shadows that seemed to move on their own at home, whispers in empty rooms, footsteps echoing where no one walked. The house had become a monument to the curse, patient, eternal, inevitable. And AJ, like the generations before him, was part of it now, a fragment in the dark memory of the walls. Final lines, lingering unease. The journal remained open on the desk, waiting for the next visitor. A page flipped slowly, as if blown by a phantom wind. In faint, jagged writing, one line appeared: "If you read this, it is already too late." The house exhaled. The shadows stirred. Silence fell. And yet, somewhere, in the corners of mirrors and the edges of vision, something waited, patient, inevitable. Another chapter begins. The sun set. The house stood quiet but alive, watching, waiting,